Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan Sutherland, and this podcast is dedicated to helping families love God and use tech. And we've done it. We made it to the end of another calendar year. It is the end of 2024, and this is our final new episode. Next week, you're going to hear the number one most listened to episode of this year. And then I'm actually going to do the number two as well, because it was only number two by 2 listens. So they're different enough that I was like, oh, that's fascinating. I don't want to pick favorites amongst my intellectual children, so I'll let you hear them both again. But I hope that you are having a season where you can be deliberate with your tech use and intentional in loving your family, because it's a great time to just be intentional with the way we use our tech and the way we love our family. So please do that well. In today's episode, today is a year in review. It's a thank you episode for all the work we've done. I want to take you on a quick little trip through time, because Gospel Tech started in 2019. In 2016, I started a nonprofit called Flint focused on sparking positive purpose in youth. I did my nonprofit work in the mornings, and I was a teacher in the afternoons. And it was 3 years of trying to figure out, can I actually hack it as a professional speaker? I say lots of words, but can I do it? And by 2019, we're like, you know what? We're not actually sure if we can do this. It wasn't and the heavens opened and I was, God's gift to speaking and it all went perfectly. But I had a lot of conviction, and the talks I'd done were good. Not just how I felt about them, but the impact we saw. This is helping people. It's equipping teachers and admin with the words to say to kids, your choices matter, and everyone's got potential. It's never too late to be great. That was the 3 main talking points of Flint and Iron conversations. So it was good. I was happy doing that work, and then felt a heavy weight that, there is a gap when I go and speak at churches and Christian schools and organizations. No one's connecting our tech use to the gospel. And this in my life, if you know my testimony, is very clear, because in May 15, 2011 was the last day I played a video game. And that led me to volunteering with Young Life in my school, which led me to realize, I love language arts and teaching. But that's not actually where most of my drive is going. My drive is to see these young people think about their choices in their lives. And so in 2019, and I'm yes, we're doing it. We're committing. We're going to go full time. June 2019, last day in the classroom. And we launched in August 2019. 2 of my sisters hosted a fundraiser, which was amazing, just in the backyard, barbecue style. It was awesome. And I stood up and they're hey, we have this nonprofit and we're going full time. We'd love your support. And I have this other thing, and it's not its own organization. It's really for how do you accomplish the mission of Flint and Iron in a church environment. I'm not going into public schools presenting gospel, because there's words there they don't have any context for. So how do we do this well? How do we help people who already trust and follow Jesus, or at least want to do that well? They don't know how, but their hearts are intent on following Jesus. How do we help them live out the gospel in their tech lives? And people supported us. It was amazing. It was humbling. Ann and I went on a walk the next day. I was wasn't that wild? We got money to do this mission. We feel called to do that. We didn't know how to make it work. And then I was no, it's actually overwhelming, because people just gave us money and we don't know what we're doing. We didn't have the name Gospel Tech. We didn't have a website. We didn't have a podcast. We didn't have any talks. We just had an idea. And people showed up, and that was amazing, because March 2020, actually February 2020, my dad and I were on our way back from a conference, and as you know where this is going, right? COVID was rolling, and by March, everything was shut down. So I was a professional speaker in theory. I was a passionate speaker, at least, with 0 content, no website, and no audience. And a great time to start a podcast, by the way. If you go back, we still haven't culled the original episode. You can go listen to it. It's painful. But it's there as a reminder that this work is not moving forward because I'm good enough. It's not moving forward because we have had a flawless, watertight plan that we knew from the beginning was just going to work. It has moved forward because the Lord has been very gracious to give Ann and I a holy discontent, if you will, that we've just never felt the ability to quit. And I don't mean that in any of the negatives ways. I mean, we have prayed it and brought it before the Lord. And Lord, it isn't easy. It's not working. We don't know why you're not releasing us to feel passionate about something else. We still feel this earnest desire for families to have these resources. What are we doing? And then 2022 hit. It was a solid 18 months of really hard work and prayer, and our board being intentional and deliberate, encouraging and prayerful to make sure we're not missing the boat. This isn't hard because we're disobedient. It's not hard because we're doing the wrong thing or the wrong way. It's just hard because it's hard. And sometimes life is, and work is, and mission is. And so now, 2022, we actually reverse engineered the gospel tech back to Flint and Iron, which is wild. So we originally started trying to reach public school audiences, tip of the spear evangelism of sharing messages of hope and purpose. And then gospel tech gained all this momentum. And now Flint and Iron is the gospel tech message, but made appropriate for an audience that can't handle all of those words. They don't know sin and God. And like, there's so much baggage there that I go in, I did it this week. I've done it 3 times in the last 10 days into public schools or city organizations. And I present a message for young people using the best tech well, and for parents making tech safe at home. And so Flint and Iron is still the nonprofit. Gospel Tech is still the DBA. And we are doing this work of sparking purpose in youth, but we're not doing it because we're a juggernaut of thought and motivation, but because you all are listening and sharing and applying it, and people see that and go, wow, I want the confidence to parent my kids in this. Like, how do I do it? And it's not because Nathan has all the perfect answers, but instead because I care about your family, and I have some resources, and I have the ability to communicate that to you so you can go and love your children well. So when we talk gospel tech, it's threefold. I want you to be able to talk about healthy tech, then communicate the gospel, and then apply the hope of the gospel. The good news that you're a sinner saved by grace to your daily tech life. Like, all right, so if you're saved by grace, what does that look like for accountability? It doesn't mean the good enough rules in your tech is going to save your kid. It does mean that good enough rules are a way you can show love for your kid and be deliberate in those conversations. They make mistakes hard to make because it's a loving thing to do, right? And make real consequences, not to teach a character lesson from pain, but to say, hey, I love you apparently more than you love yourself right now. So I'm going to step in and I'm going to make a boundary here because this is hurting you or it's hurting others. And I can't, in good conscience and good faith, loving you well, allow that to continue unabated. So that is the work we now do. And in this past year, we have seen it grow. There's really 3 areas I want to specifically talk to you about. First, we're going to celebrate. Then I want to talk about what we're feeling called to this next year, and then how you can join us, or the fancy C word I gave for that, is how we can continue this work. It's like I had a C, it was alliteration. Maybe I tried too hard, but here it is. First, celebrate. We have seen growth this year in a number of areas that are important. And if you see me on YouTube looking to my left, it's because I've got notes to make sure that I hit them right and succinctly enough. So that's what's going on. First, we've seen Flint and Iron grow. This past year, been able to talk at massive tech organizations, which is awesome. Speaking directly to the parents of people raising children while working for the trillion-dollar corporations that make these products. And it's really cool. I mean, tool and drool tech in the hearts and minds of those parents is something I'm very passionate about seeing happen, because we need the designers to be thoughtful about, hey, am I creating a tool to help people leverage their creativity and abilities, or making drool where I'm trying to leverage those people for profit? And as long as I'm clear about what I'm doing, I'm actually okay with that. As long as you know the choice, I just don't want there to be confusion, that people think they're doing one thing, dedicating their life and efforts to helping, when actually it's got some pretty nasty hooks involved, and people are dedicating their God-given talents to things that are actually making people's hearts and minds worse. So as long as you know what you're up to, we're cool. But that's been really neat, talking at universities here local in the Northwest, which has been awesome, directly to students and then to families as well and community members. They host an event and I get to be a part of that. Working with churches, public schools, public schools around here in the Northwest specifically, with the opportunity to talk to either parents or students directly. Assembly style leadership format, AVID groups. AVID is like a college prep organization here in the Northwest, specifically aimed at young people who are first-time college attendees or would be first-time college attendees, or believe they don't currently have the skills to attend a college and want to get ready for their career and the academic preparation they need for that. And AVID is an amazing program for that. So that's what Flint and Iron has been able to do. And we don't have any kind of advertisements right now for Flint and Iron because I'm one human being doing this work. I take those opportunities when they come and am prayerful about that. And then Gospel Tech is the one that we've really been seeing a massive amount of growth in, and seeing that missional focus of Flint and Iron, sparking purpose in youth, be just absolutely ripe. And a harvest is plentiful and bountiful for parents and leaders who want to do a good job raising healthy youth in a tech world. So we've worked with Christian schools in our community, but then also across the country. I've been able to fly out from Washington State to California and to Pennsylvania to Florida and to Wisconsin just places where it's no longer just direct word of mouth. They're finding us through social media and people sharing it on social media. They're finding us through some of the interviews that I do through radio and through podcasts, through our amazing missional partners of Christa Ministries, who are putting together this podcast right now. It sounds good because Christa Ministries has stepped in, and Rebecca and an amazing team of people at Christa have linked arms with us and said, hey, we want to be partners with you in getting this resource out. And that is, again, incredibly humbling. That was, by the way, from a supporter who was like, you know what? I know some people who work in this field. Would you be interested in talking to them? Like someone who knew us and cared about us just said, hey, can I be the handshake to get you introduced? And that introduction was like so exciting for both of us that we now work together, and Christa Ministries is a partner in helping us reach more families to make this podcast a resource for people that need to hear the good news of the gospel. The good news that, yes, you're a sinner and that's bad news. And there's good news in light of that you don't have to be good enough to earn your way onto God's team, that he sent his son. And that when you put your faith in his son, he makes you a child and redeems you for good works. You're not saved from this world. You're saved for it, to see his kingdom come and his will be done. And that means in how you use your tech and what tech you use and how we raise our kids up in this tech world. And that's awesome to have that amazing partner. So Gospel Tech has continued to grow. I'm actually going back in March and then again in April to Florida, once to Northern, we're going to be in Orlando, and then the second one south to Sarasota. So my goodness, that wasn't the plan, but here we go. I've got some frequent flyer miles now, and it has been amazing. And I will say, being a more compact person, I'm not very tall. Traveling by plane is fine. I actually get a lot of work done, right? Like it's a 6.5 hour flight here from Washington, but you know what? I work 6.5 hour days and more. Like I can do that. So it's just a work day on a plane with no distractions. It's the best. So I digress. I have traveled, which has been cool. Anyway, Anna and planes are not copacetic all the time. It has been really neat. And our partners, I mentioned Christa, but we've also had Salem Ministries, another Northwest radio network. And then Fierce Families, Ryan and Selena Frederick are also part of Lion Press. And they were part of getting our book out. So my book, Gospel Centered Tech, and Anna's book, The Graceful Disconnect, a 25-day devotional, are both out. And that is humbling as well. We've officially done the books that we have talked about and prayed about. And I mentioned way too many times at fundraisers over the last 6 years, only to have it be this year, which was such a blessing. As I have traveled, what I have found is that book is the thing. It's 100 pages. It's basically 10 pages a chapter. And those top 10 topics are basically the things I get asked the most. So I address social media, and I address pornography, and I address video games, and I address making tech safe at home, and all healthy reset, all of the stuff. You can do it by the chapter, or you can do it big picture. And the goal is someone hears my talk, rather than sending someone a 90-minute YouTube link, they can hand them a book, and then in 5 minutes, they can get practical takeaways, tangible encouragement and instruction in how they connect the gospel to their tech. Like that's awesome. And I'm so pumped that is out there. And then Anna's, please read Anna's. It's so good. Like if you don't laugh out loud just in the introduction, then the book may not be for you. Like read the introduction. It's Anna's voice to a T. She absolutely nails her like personality in written form, and it's really good. And good news is I don't nail my personality in written form because there'd be so many extra words. So mine is well edited and and much more concise than if you were just talking to me like this podcast right now. In addition to growth, though, we have grown on our team. Our growth, so we have our bookkeeper, who's amazing. Kate keeps our numbers in line, and we are very intentional and deliberate with where our money comes from, how we handle that money, and how it is spent. Then we gained Brianna, our admin extraordinaire, who helps me organize everything from my email to my calendar. And if you've ever tried to book something with Gospel Tech, you'll get a link, a little scheduling link. That is Brianna's magic. She makes it so that you can click the link, pick a day that works for you. It loads up on my calendar, and we're rolling. For an ADD person, it is a lifesaver. So thank you, Brianna. And then we added Kendra. And Kendra, if you've noticed our Instagram, YouTube, less YouTube, Instagram and Facebook primarily, are getting organized and they're getting structured so that, as Scott Galloway says in, oh my goodness, I'm going to forget, the Big Four. That people go to Google before they go to God. When people search the internet looking for answers to their tech issues or their questions about, is this okay? We want them to land on hope-focused and truly gospel-centered resources. And so we're building out those resources, and Kendra has been massive in helping us formulate. Now, the only way I've been able to get such amazing team members is we've had support. We have donors who have allowed that. In fact, one donor came and said, what do you need? And I was like, I need an admin. And that donor wrote a check for the admin. And guess what? Our amazing bookkeeper made a separate category. So it's not getting spent on other stuff. And it's set aside as this is our admin funds. This is how we make this work happen. And that's humbling. That's incredible because yes, I needed that, but I didn't have the resource for that. And so thank you to everyone who's been supporters and who's made this work happen, because I'm not being facetious when I say that. Like, I would just be one loud guy lonely in a room without your support and without your relational connections. Which brings us then to our call. All right, so that's where the Lord's brought us this past year. We have seen growth on all fronts, and that's cool. But the goal isn't just bigger and busier. And I was very clear about this. If you're at the fundraiser or you listen to that episode, like, that is not the goal. The goal is not just see this go to the moon. We are not the Dogecoin of ministry. We instead are really deliberate about equipping parents, and we want to do whatever's going to help us do that well. So the call this year is, again, equip families to talk about healthy tech, communicate the gospel clearly, and then apply it to their tech lives. And we're doing that through the resources that you've helped us make. So first and foremost, we got this podcast on the weekly. Then we have the live talks, an online workshop, and then the books. So that is what we feel called to. We being Anna and myself, certainly, that's the front line, but we are supported by an amazing board who is prayerful, who does not think all of my ideas are shiny and fantastic and has lots of questions about how and why I do things. And that's their job. Their job is not to set up mission and vision. Their job is to hear my heart, the call we have, to pray into that and make sure that we're not getting mission drift and to make sure that we're executing the mission in the best way possible. And so just a quick example, peek behind the curtain. If you are me, I don't know why I would put you in my shoes. In my life, I am a husband, a father of three, and then have this full-time ministry. That puts certain limits on me because I need to be a husband first, a father second, and a full-time minister third. So flying to Florida, that takes a lot, right? Anna's going to be here for a week without my support, with humans who still have sports in life, and with all the normal stuff. Like, someone gets sick, other things happen. Like, I'm not immediately available to support. And yes, we're intentional with that sacrifice, but like, that there's a cost to that. And so as we look into where do we feel called, like Nathan speaking 180 times a year is not currently in the cards. We do not feel peace. As we pray about that and pray about what we believe are our God-given priorities, that doesn't line up with them. So then what do we do? And that is where the board steps in and helps us make these decisions, pushes back on our ideas, because while there's lots of ways we could do this work, there's only so many ways I'm physically capable of doing it at the same time. I can't full-time speak 180 days a year and make online resources. And right, like, I'm not that person. Maybe someone could. It's not me. And that is what we are leaning into. We feel called to equip families, specifically the parents. And then I work with the young people because that's a passion of mine. But I believe I can reach more young people by reaching more of the mentors, teachers, parents, pastors, leader teams, who are the ones making the environments these young people are learning and living and playing in. So that is how we are feeling called in gospel tech, and believe we are called to bring the gospel to bear. And those are the resources we're using to do it around here in the Northwest. A lot of that looks like churches teaming up. And I know if you work in a church, this is hard. Sometimes it has to be neutral site, I have found, because people don't want to be sending their members to another church's building. But can I please just put this down right here? Two things. One, if you don't belong to a Bible teaching church, please find one. Find a church that believes the Bible, that teaches the gospel, and that helps people apply it through weekly preaching, and then through some kind of discipleship format. So that can be church groups or training programs or community groups or life groups, whatever that would be. So that's first and foremost. And the second is, can we please remember that there's a capital C church, that it is not about the success of our individual building, but rather about the body of Christ, the bride of Christ, and us connecting the gospel to our lives in practical ways, not so that it's functional in a making us better way, but that we begin to see it bear on our hearts and lives because we died with Christ. We now live with him. And that should look different than when we lived for ourselves. Like there's a practicality of faith of like, all right, I believe Jesus is alive, and that should matter in our decisions. I bring that up because I have found resistance to churches partnering. And the silly part about that is I don't charge more for more people. So like there's a cost I need to make for my family to live, right? Like, so there's a cost to me coming out and presenting, but it's no more work for me to come out and present to 100 people than 50 or to 500 people than 100. So I strongly encourage, and we've seen churches do this, but the first pitch, when one church goes to another pitch, like they're almost always, there's a sense of like it's a trap. What are you doing? Why do you want our members in your building? So sometimes third party locations, neutral sites work. But I have seen churches grow in that. And that whole tangent was to say, yes, let's communicate the gospel. And yes, let's partner with the church, capital C, not just individual churches. Because again, my goal isn't to do more of these talks. My goal is to reach more families. And I can do that better when churches partner together and come together with all of the resource they've got. Partner with your local YMCA, your local schools, your local organizations and co-ops and momcos, and which is formerly MOPS. Like whatever it is, let's do it. Let's get people in the room and let's equip them to have these conversations. Because I'm finding after 90 minutes, a single conversation can change the way you think about tech and the way you parent it. And that is really cool because it's not, as I've said, because I've had a perfect plan for the last 5 years. It is because the Lord's been very, very faithful to humbly and gently direct this conversation in a way that helps families and doesn't just me saying words. So how can we continue this work? If that's the call, how can we continue it? First, you can continue this relationally. Continue to connect us to your churches, to your schools, to the organizations you work in on the Flint and Iron side especially, but also Gospel Tech. If you work for a Christian organization, I would love to be a resource to equip your families, your leaders, and the young people you represent. Relationally connect us. That is something I can't do. No amount of advertising and marketing can convince an organization that I'm worth trusting with their children and with their families. But you can. You can bring it up. And there's a really good chance they've already been thinking about it. This is what I'm finding. We've been talking about this for a year, and then someone brought you up. Or I had one organization who actually Googled like gospel technology teens. And well, it turns out if you look up gospel tech teens, that's me. So like that was how I got flown out to one. I was like, how'd you find us? Like Google search. I'm like, whoa, that's wild. Actually, I think it was a YouTube search. It wasn't even a full Google. Like they were in YouTube and just looking for content. And it pulled up my 85 YouTube follower channel, which you got to know you have a high SEO result when you only have 85 subscribers. So boom, there you go. But that being said, connect us relationally. It's made such a difference for the families we can connect with and in this ministry's ability to reach more people. The second is support us financially. That's amazing. I mentioned already how people have had an impact. That is incredible to be able to say, we have an admin because of a specific person. If you read the front of my book, I walk through some of the people who first believed in us. I mentioned Brad and Barbara, the first people to give us a check before we had an organization or anything. They just gave it to us personally when they heard our heart for this ministry. I mentioned Blair, who came out and said, what do you need support with? And I said, this book. We need financial support to make this book happen. And Blair showed up and made it happen. Again, Kate making separate categories to make sure we didn't spend the money on anything else. Like, that's an incredible blessing. You all have made that happen. Thank you for that. And it's a blessing to be a 501c3 because we can take those donations and make them happen. And yes, when we're Flint and Iron, it goes in a separate kitty. So when I got paid by a large tech company to do a talk, that did not go to Gospel Tech work. There is a separate column in our books to make sure that that work, basically it works like a scholarship at that point. I make that money and then I get to go to schools and say, hey, a local tech organization gave us this money. I'd like to present this content. Would you like an assembly? So that's humbling again, and so cool. And we are making sure we're being deliberate. So if you're hearing this and be like, yeah, but how's the faith-based piece? We do not, this is not a joke. We're not trying to be cute about this. The only reason it's all one organization is because it's still accomplishing one mission, sparking purpose in youth. So please hear that and know that that is, it's intentional for us. The finances are huge and we are so blessed for that. Third and finally is prayerfully. The Lord has opened doors. The Lord has closed them. The Lord has brought us through very hard, dry, dark seasons. And that's not metaphorical. I had my first opportunity to experience anxiety and depression in that first 18 months I mentioned. And if you've listened to this podcast since then, you know about that. You heard Mopey Nathan. You can still go find it. I haven't culled those episodes yet. But we've also been brought into really sweet seasons, not just because we are seeing it grow, the ministry being it, but because we are seeing as we grow, I'm able to speak to people that never would have heard these words and are able to then apply that to their lives and bring hope and light and be cycle breakers for cycles of unhealthy tech, of abusive tech use, and of unhealthy life situations where I get to be an emissary of Christ and see the value in that person, even when they don't see it, or see the value in that relationship, even when it seems like it's on its last threads and it's breaking. The Lord is a Lord of redemption and restoration, and we can see that lived out in our lives, bringing forgiveness and restoration and healing, even when there are unbelievers involved. It is not just within the capital C church, but into the communities that we live in. So thank you all for supporting this ministry, either through your relationships, through your finances, through your prayers. You're listening to this, that is support, because you are then going to apply the resources that we talk about, the ideas of tool and rule tech, the idea of a healthy tech reset for an acronym, looking at how we can know, and then building hedges, which is the bedrock of how we go about applying the idea of the gospel to our daily tech lives. And it is a blessing to be able to do. So thanks for making it happen. As we look into the new year, I would love to hear your thoughts. If you're like, hey, but 2025, I want to talk about, give it to me. We've got some new resources that are coming out soon. I'm excited for you to see those. We are not done with this good work yet, but we are seeing it grow, and it's happening because you're on this ministry, on this mission with us, and you're allowing us to do this ministry because you're inviting us into your lives. So thank you. Please join us next week as we continue this conversation about how we can love God and use tech. And then if you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Nathan@gospeltech.net, or check us out at Love God Use Tech on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And I will see you next week. Have a Merry Christmas.